Hi, I'm Joe Polizzi, and this is the Content Inc. podcast. 5 minutes every Monday for content creators who desire to be content entrepreneurs. If making money with your content seems like an uphill battle, I have really good news for you. The 2023 Content Entrepreneur Research is out. Coaching, books, and online courses are the top 3 most profitable and most utilized tactics to monetize content. Turning your content into a printed book with Lulu has never been easier. Create a free account at lulu.com today. Hey gang, this is Joe. Very special episode here with my friend Brian Clark. I'm sure you know of Brian. Brian and I have been around the bend in the content marketing industry for many, many years. He has created and exited many successful businesses. And believe it or not, this is Brian's 3rd appearance on the Content Inc. podcast, which is hard to believe because I didn't even know I had other guests. But this is number 3. And if you want to know more about Brian, you can check him out in episode 297, and I'll put it in the show notes. But Brian and I were emailing back and forth, and he was talking about the longevity economy. And I thought that this was a really important topic that you needed to hear. And I was going to break this into 2 episodes because it's about 40 minutes long. And then I just said, the heck with it. We'll just do one great, amazing episode. So this is Brian and my conversation about the longevity economy. Really, really important. I think you'll love what Brian has to say. And you can get more information about what Brian's doing at longevitygains.com. And I'll also put that in the show notes. But here you go. Interview with Mr. Brian Clark. Brian Clark, you have been on this podcast. Actually, this will be your 3rd appearance on the Content Inc. podcast. And this more than anyone else because we don't generally have people on the podcast. It's generally just me. And I don't like having guests.
I'm like that annoying thing that keeps showing up, but I am always happy to be here.
But I liked it. We were just touching bases. We generally do every few months. One of us will send an email out. And I've been a subscriber of Further ever since you started this. But I think everybody here listening sort of knows your background from, recovering attorney to copy blogger to, now what you're doing. And I guess that's what I want to hear is how did you get into this, this content niche, if you will, about, I don't want to say aging or maybe the way that I would put it when I get further in my inbox is how do I make the most of where I am now with my physical age and taking that and being all I want to be, being a little bit older and not as young as I used to be. Is that a correct way to put it? Or is there something more? Because you talk about mental health, you talk about physical health, you talk about, money and wealth. But it seems to be for 40 plus, 50 plus. What would you say?
Yeah, it's probably most focused now on 50 and above, which is a club you just joined. Welcome.
Yes.
But
I'm so happy about this.
So most people know I started Copy Blogger. That was back in January of 2006. By the fall of 2007, I had just turned 40 and had just launched the first startup off of Copy Blogger. And I did that 3 times, 3 different companies. They all hit 7 figures. They were all bootstrapped, no investing, no advertising back in the good old days of social media. And all of this happened between my 40th birthday and roughly turning 50. Studio Press and Rainmaker were acquired in 2 separate transactions in 2018 and 2019. Anyway, during that 10-year period, I experienced the most success of my life, more than I really had ever aspired to, frankly. And yet I was unhappy. And so about 2015, I said, you've always been this type that just kind of blew off personal development stuff. maybe you need to look into that a little bit because you're not happy, and that's not good. And as I go along with it, I figure a lot of things out. But more and more, I start realizing that a lot of people are unhappy during their 40s. While the midlife crisis is largely a myth, we tend to be kind of discontent in our 40s. We start questioning things, and we're not as happy, even though most people, again, are. That's kind of their successful streak right there during that period of time. So fast forward to after the first acquisition, we're living in France. I'm not supposed to be working, but you know me. And I realize that what I'm really talking about it further are middle-age issues. You reach peak unhappiness about 47, but when you get to 50, you start becoming happier. Now, of course, this doesn't apply equally to everyone, but it is statistically significant. So it was at that time while we were in France that I decided that further would be about midlife, not just general personal development. And I read a book called The Longevity Economy by Joseph Coughlin, who heads up the Age Lab at MIT. And that is what blew my mind, because I thought I was just doing a purpose-driven thing. But it turns out that older people are the next big thing. In fact, it's already started. And yet, as you probably know, having joined the club after 18 to 49 demographic, we essentially become invisible to marketers and advertisers. And it's crazy because we amount to more than half of consumer spending, and significantly declining birth rates. The population is aging greatly. And this is not a temporary thing. It's going forward for the rest of this century at least. We would have to have a lot of young people having a lot of babies to correct this, and that would still take 20 or 30 years to come to bear. So we are living in an older population. Marketers and businesses have not caught up yet, but I think we're almost at the point where it's become inevitable that you will see a very big shift in the way we think about who the most vibrant consumers are.
So it sounds like you read this book, you were already feeling this, and then you read this book, and you're basically saying there's a huge missed opportunity by companies out there that are just targeting the 18 to 49 market, when most of the buying power is 50 plus. Now, our audience of content creators, what you're saying resonates with me, because when we first started the Tilt 2020, 2021, and we were targeting content creators, and you and I were talking a lot about this at the time, I was thinking, young YouTubers, people getting out of college that they want to build their own businesses and become content creators. And I had this idea in my head of a younger content creator. And then we created this newsletter, and I realized that the average age of the people that get our newsletter are between 40 and 50 years old. They're basically our age. And so our audience are second career entrepreneurs who have some kind of expertise and they're going into something, or they're content creators like you and I. We've been doing this for a long time. So I guess all those people that are creating content for wherever their audiences are, you're saying that we need to be aware that there's a missed opportunity here. Is that kind of what you're saying, from like that we can market our way out of this idea that 50 plus shouldn't be ignored anymore? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Well, I like to say that marketing created this situation, and it's going to be marketing that gets it out of us, even though there's a lot of, activism going on right now, a lot of awareness being created about the aging population, anti-ageism, calls for government intervention. But what was fascinating to me, Joe, is that our current fascination with youth and why we effectively ignore people over 50. So like the mid 1940s, there was a guy who he started out as the stock boy in a shoe store. And And he had the idea and went to the owner and said, hey, we should advertise our athletic shoes to teenage boys. And that sounds obvious, right? But no one even acknowledged teenagers as a distinct group back then. Before that point, there wasn't really adolescence. You were a child and then you were an adult, right? Not this go until you're 30 type stuff that we got now. So that was his idea, and it was a home run. So he started the first market research firm that literally talked to teenagers about their attitudes and what they liked and what they didn't like. Meanwhile, a woman named Helen Valentine started 17 Magazine, which was aimed at teenage girls. And same thing. This was not a market. This is not something that you did. But once it happened, this was exactly in 1945. That's when the first baby boomers were born. So you have this kind of pioneering work that created youth culture. Then you have this massive amount of kids. And marketers go, oh, yeah, so this is the new thing. We're going to market to these kids because there's so much of them and there's so much money to be made. And the irony is now they're the older people and they're being ignored. And with that much purchasing power, you know how much money the baby boomers have collectively. It's the last great amount of generational wealth really at this point. And they're not happy about that. So this is really the beginning of you can't start ignoring us now. We're the ones who have all the money. Then we can get into Generation X, which is a different story. Now that really comes down to the idea of retirement and our idea that you retire around 65. For us, it's 67 if you're looking at it from Social Security. So Social Security was created in, I think, the mid 1930s, I think 1935. And it was designed to help older people, stop working. At that time, we had basically a blue collar labor force. It was also designed to get older people out of the labor market to make room for younger people. At the time, that made a lot of sense. And here's the catch. The government knew from actuarial tables that most people weren't going to make it to 65 anyways. And if you did, you weren't even going to collect benefits for that long, right? Okay. But the interesting thing about that is Americans did not embrace retirement. It was a very different time from, I think, the consumer-driven culture that we have now. Your contribution to society at that time was what you do and what you give, and that was through work. So you talk to people and you say, okay, you're 65, you can retire now. And a lot of people are like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to sit around and do nothing? Marketers get together, including the people who founded AARP, American Association of Retired People, and they legitimately crafted messages that created the golden years concept, that this is your reward for a long life of work. Del Webb created the first retirement community in Arizona. And all of a sudden, there was this retirement dream. So instead of being something strange that people didn't want to do, this became what you were supposed to do. Again, there's always a catch. At that time, almost every company offered pensions, right? And you had all these people who were flush with cash in the late 50s, early 60s, in a way that did not last. As soon as we went self-directed with 401ks, saving rates just plummeted for most people. And then you add to that a couple of interesting things. First, baby boomers who do have enough money to retire are coming back to work because they're bored. Retirement, you lose your sense of purpose, right? And so the unretirement trend happens, and you start seeing older people coming back, much to the dismay of Gen Xers who thought they were moving into the C-suite, right? Okay. And then you have the Gen Xers who don't have enough money to retire, like not even close. And they're just kind of resigned to the fact that they're going to have to work longer, if not perpetually. all of this coming together means people are working longer. Some people don't want to retire. Some people can't retire. And some people are worried that they're going to run out of money. And this is the other dynamic. So you have marketers who created the popular conception of retirement. It doesn't really exist anymore. And then our entire society is kind of built around these ideas. Young is good, old is bad. People retire. Once they retire, they become fixed income citizens. They don't spend enough money. And that's how we got where we are, compounded by the fact that employers will often push people out in legal ways like layoffs when they're in their 50s. So that's really the framework for how we ended up in a society that discounts older people across the board. And since I've really started doing research for the Longevity Gains Project, I never really noticed how ageist we all are. I mean, it's just casual. It's the last great prejudice that they call it, because we just, no one thinks twice about making an ageist joke when they would never think of saying something racist or misogynist or something like that. The worst offenders are often older people themselves. And here's why that's a bad thing. Your attitude toward aging as you get older literally determines how well you'll live as an older person and how long you'll live as an older person, generally because you tend to take better care of yourself when you have positive attitudes about aging.
Well, thank you for that uplifting scenario. I don't know exactly how to feel about all that. I guess the point is, I'm 50 now, as you said. I've got parents that are in their 80s that I feel could still be more active than they are, I guess is a good way to put it. It seems like a lot of people my parents' age have just relegated to the fact of stasis and just will do the same day over and over again. I don't know if that's their decision or if that's just, it seems like we're almost programmed into that these days. But we have the data. What you're saying is right. There's a lot of wealth there. There's a lot of opportunities to spend. Why do marketers keep making the mistakes of? I mean, the only thing that I see targeting older Americans, when I'm watching, let's say, a 30-second commercial or I see a magazine ad or something on the internet, is about retirement. I mean, that just seems to be it. Why? I mean, we have the data. We know the spending. What's going to get us out of this rut to change the way that we market to older consumers?
It's really a lack of awareness, which is why I went from my consumer level, project of Further to the B2B project of Longevity Gains. Is people don't know this. It's this vast amount of money just waiting there from people who want to spend it, who are not happy that they're ignored. And again, while it's happening right now today with the baby boomers, it's going to go forward for decades. So as you mentioned earlier, a lot of our audiences are Gen Xers. I attribute that to the way I marketed with Copyblogger. I was always making, pop culture references that happened to be Gen X specific. Yep. That's how, we kind of ended up with it. It's Gen Xers that will likely be the ones who capitalize on this megatrend the most, because we're the most entrepreneurial generation that's currently active. We're becoming older ourselves. Years to 2030. At that point, every baby boomer is over 65. The first Gen Xers are turning 65. Jeez. And this is the shocking thing. The first millennials turn 50. Do you think
that's crazy?
We're going to be ignoring people over 50 when that happens? No. But the key is, just like, remember when you coined the term content marketing and how long it took for that movement to finally go mainstream? We're kind of at that point right now with the longevity economy. So if you're seeing where things are going, then you're starting to think about your strategy about this right now. So as I said, marketing got us into this mess, but the opportunity for specifically content marketers and content entrepreneurs in this space to empower and advocate for older people during this particular stage. I'm a big proponent that we need young people and older people to get along, not this us against them type stuff that they did, with the baby boomers in the first place when they were young. We need intergenerational harmony. But the truth is, older people are going to run stuff. And I think it is in our best interest as a society to recognize that, acknowledge, respect, don't have ageism in the other direction towards young people. That's kind of utopian, but I really think it'll be a mix of activism. There'll be government intervention, but it's going to be market forces, just like it was 60 years ago.
So do you feel, from what you're saying, if I'm looking at this as a content marketer, I'm thinking there's a content gap here and an opportunity for creators to target a group of people in this case that would be a little bit older than we would normally have targeted in certain niches, doing things that we might not have thought of because of this unretirement trend. And at the same time, if you believe that there's going to be a lot of organizations that are going to say, hey, we have to market to this group because this group is very, very wealthy and they have a lot more money than any other group of people, then those people that start up let's say a content entrepreneur business focusing on these group of people then can reap the rewards, because then you're going to have sponsors and benefactors that are going to wake up to the opportunity and say, who's doing this? So maybe in 2, 3, or 4 years, this could be a huge business opportunity. Or am I reading this wrong? Would you agree with that?
No, I think you're dead on. For example, we don't really mess with sponsorships on Further right now, but that ad space is going to be gold going forward. But that we're making money right now because we understand our audience and we're creating products. But the reality is the market for everything will go up if older people work longer and therefore spend longer, right? They don't become that fixed income citizen. And there is demand, because the misconceptions and stereotypes about old people are just way off the mark. And that's a lot of what we talk about. Older people are people too, and they want to have fun and they want to live great lives. I know, shocking, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everything that's being driven here is by what's called health span. It's not how long you live, it's how long you live in a healthy state. Yeah. And so when you talk about your parents or my parents, there's a big generational attitudinal shift going on here. If you look at Jennifer Lopez or Brad Pitt, right, compared to, say, Wilford Brimley. Remember when he was in Cocoon as a geriatric? He was 49.
That is
right?
Scary.
And now Brad Pitt is what, 60? Come on. So things are changing. So what? On one hand, there is a market to be served of existing older people who, by all measures, there are baby boomers that are the healthiest older people in the history of the world. But that's only going to increase over time. Millennials are already interested in things like healthy aging. So this is the driver of the market. It's highly correlated, not with income, but with education. And I don't know if you've heard, but after COVID, obviously life expectancy dropped due to the large number of deaths of older people. And in the United States, it didn't rebound. And people are like, well, how can you talk about longevity when average lifespan just dropped? Well, remember, that's an average. There's a map that you can look at that shows life expectancy across the so-called United States, which is a dangerous thing to say in any regard these days. But it correlates highly with obesity rates, and it's highly concentrated in the South, and which is a cultural and educational problem where people don't take care of themselves very well in these areas, while in other areas you'll see people living well into their 80s or 90s. You're generally going to want to market to people who take care of themselves, who are vibrant about getting older, who have positive attitudes about aging. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So again, there's a near-term play, but there's also the long game. And that, to me, is the perfect market opportunity. It's not going to go away.
So a couple questions before we wrap up with this one, Brian. So I understand further. I think everybody gets that. So now it sounds like you're on a new mission. Like, why are you personally on this new mission to educate people about this? Because you and I have had some really frank conversations. I mean, it's not that we're necessarily looking for a new business opportunity. This is obviously something you're passionate about. So why has this become such a passion for you personally?
I guess it's the opposite way around. I got fired up about it, and I tend to be that kind of purpose-driven person. Like in this case, it's such a vast shift. We're talking about $21 trillion, Joe. I mean, that's ridiculous. What have we, what did I make money with over the last 15 years? It was content marketing, which was a movement, WordPress, which was a movement, and online education, all things that were new back then and are not as new now. But those are tiny compared to what we're talking about here. So on one hand, I just got fired up about it because it's important. I actually think that marketers can help change the world for the better. Maybe I'm still naive and idealistic to a certain degree, but if you don't address the inequalities here currently, well, first of all, who's going to spend money? Who was propping up the economy? Baby boomers. These people are almost uniformly over the age of 60. Many of them are retired, but they have a boatload of money. So it's happening now. It's going forward in the future. And I have no intention, I figure if the new midlife goes until 75, I'll call it quits at 75, so that means I got 20 years to do stuff. So.
It's so interesting. I mean, I sort of went into retirement when Pam and I sold Content Marketing Institute, but then I realized for the first time that's not a thing. Like it doesn't really exist. Like does anyone really want to retire? No, you want to keep, like, what does that mean from like traditional work? You want to keep busy all the time. You want to have a purpose. You want to keep finding new opportunities, which is, I think, what you and I do. But the last question I wanted to ask you about is, again, a little bit more personal, if you don't mind. But I think you and I have been through career changes, many career changes over the past 10 years or so, and some good times, some bad times, some rough times to get through. What would your advice be, especially for content creators? I mean, we're both in this spot. Sometimes it can be very lonely to be a content creator. Sometimes you get into that content burnout situation, which, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do this again and again and again. And it's all about consistency. But when you hit that point of, I don't think I'm happy anymore with this, what are some of the things that you did personally that kind of gotten you to this point where now you're feeling really good about what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, man, because, and again, I know you and I can't see you doing nothing, especially if you live 40 or 50 more years. You know what I'm saying? So I should have taken more time off. When we came back from traveling the world with my family after the acquisitions, I kind of jumped back into it, not with both feet, but I really just wanted to find what my next thing was. And, so Jared and I teamed up, Trudy and I teamed up on Further. I knew Further was a thing. You and I kicked around ideas and projects, and now you've gone ahead and exited again and put that behind you. But my idea is, work hard for a little bit. But my goal is, now that my son just started college, My daughter's been out for a few years. So I want to write and do stuff that matters while I travel. So, build a little bit of a team around you that can do the stuff you don't want to do and focus on. But the businesses I'm creating right now are very much focused on what I'm good at it and what I want to continue doing. I will not be starting another software company. I will not be doing anything that makes me work 12, 15 hours a day. But I really don't see a stopping point.
Well, I love that mentality, and it's so rare to find. I know with a lot of the friends that I've had over the years, they still believe you work and then it stops. And then there's this magical place called retirement that you do stuff. And they get to this point, they've worked 30 years, and then they really don't have a plan for the second part of their life, which could be the greatest part of that they've ever had, the happiest that they've ever been, but they haven't set themselves up for that. Where I like being in a position, I think we're sort of in the same thing, where you have a passion, you see an opportunity, and you could start a project. You can write about that. I can write a book about that. Right. I could do it from anywhere in the world. And that's why I love content entrepreneurship, because it gives you that opportunity. So, Brian, I think a lot of people, well, I was just going to say, a lot of people, especially with traditional jobs, they really want to quit that job, and they think that means they want to quit working. It's not that I want to quit. It's I want to quit doing that. Yep. And I want to do something that has more meaning and purpose. And that, to me, is optimistic, and it's something to really strive for. It's so difficult, though, culturally, I think, because when you meet somebody for the first time, generally your second or third question is, what do you do? Because we define ourselves by our work. And I think, I have always had a problem. I don't know about you, but I've always had a problem answering that question. I mean, what do you mean? What do I write and I write a newsletter, and I do a podcast, and I got this thing on LinkedIn, and I got a nonprofit. I could list 37 things that I do right now. And, but I don't, but you can't say that. Like, I would like to start off with another question that we talk to people about that has nothing to do with work. I think we should be defined differently, but that's probably another podcast in and of itself.
Well, I think we're at a situation where we are facing cultural change due to massive demographic change. Again, we had a cultural change 60 years ago at the beginning of the baby boom generation. I think we're due for another one. AI will play into this. Maybe we're freed up a little bit more to do more creative work. We'll see how it all plays out, but certain things are indisputable. And one is the population is getting older, and it's going to stay that way for the rest of the century.
Brian, if people want to follow up and more information about the longevity economy and the other stuff you're working on, where do you want to send them?
Okay, so we just released our first ebook over at longevitygains.com. And that basically walks you through the foundational stuff you need to know. And then you can subscribe to the free newsletter and continue to be kind of educated. And then, if you're an older person, which you may be if you're listening to this, our age, you're most likely going to be the one who benefits from this shift as a content entrepreneur. But you also have to take care of yourself, and you have to, focus on your health and your personal development in addition to the economic stuff, because life does get better after 50. It's hard to believe, but, I think I'm living proof.
That's a great way, nice, positive way to end this. Brian, thank you so much. It's been an amazing ride, just your friendship over the years. I continue to be amazed by the stuff you get into. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Joe.